My name is Gabe Woolley. I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm a teacher, a son, a brother, and an uncle. In 2018, my nephew, Elijah Woolley, at 14 months old, died unexpectedly in his crib. The Wagoner County officials descended upon the home of my parents in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, and a story of an unexpected death from sudden infant death syndrome was taken and spun as a murder and child sexual abuse by Wagoner County officials. As a result, Clayton Woolley, at 5 years old, was taken from his home and never returned. This is a story of a justice system operating under the guise of guilty until proven innocent. This is a story of injustice, a lack of accountability. The purpose of this podcast is to raise awareness, hold accountability, and it is a call to action for citizens of Oklahoma and the United States for checks and balances in our systems. This is the Rescue Clayton podcast. So today we are here with Glory Woolley, Clayton Woolley's aunt, on the Rescue Clayton podcast. Glory, just go ahead and kind of tell us like who you are and about yourself just personally, and then how you tie into the Woolley family.
So obviously you said it. My name is Glory Woolley. I live in Colorado right now, currently in the Denver area for rugby. So I've been playing rugby since high school, and I played it through college and now play professionally and moved out there for that. I'm currently substitute teaching as well while I do that out in Denver. And I'm related to the Woolley family I am Bill and Lisa's daughter. I'm the youngest. And then I'm Clayton and Elijah's aunt.
What is it? What's it been like playing rugby, and that's sort of a passion of yours? Is that just and you play professional now? Mm-hmm. So what do you like so much about it, and has it served you any purpose through this time with the Rescue Clayton story? Yeah,
definitely. So I started playing. It was like I might have still been 15, but it was like right before I turned 16. Because I remember like one of the first times I drove myself was to practice, my first practice. So
this is Broken Arrow.
Yeah, this is Broken Arrow High School.
Yeah.
So I was playing rugby there. Someone asked me if I wanted to join, and I was like, sure. I'd kind of quit all the other sports I was doing at the time.
Right.
I kind of felt like I was always athletic, but never found like my sport.
Yeah.
And then I found rugby and just fell in love with it. I think it's one of those things where it's allowed me to really kind of use it as a source of therapy, like through this time.
Right.
So I travel quite a bit for it. My season kicks off here next weekend, actually. So depending on obviously if it's a home game or not, I'll be in a different state most weekends. And then in the summer, I play in two different leagues.
Yeah.
And so my professional league that happens in the summer is more of like tournament style. So I'll travel to a different city and I'll be in that city for like a week, and then I'll have like a tournament. Versus the league I'm in right now, for this season, I am doing more like just Saturday game. I travel to a city, fly back, and then, during the week I just have kind of my normal 9 to 5 and then practice after that. So
yeah. And you come frequently as much as you can back to Oklahoma to see your family.
Yeah, I do a lot of driving. So it's around 9 hours there, 9 hours back from Tulsa to Denver. Right. And my fiance and I, we do it pretty regularly. So like
with the dog.
Yeah, with my dog Finn. So in the last 4 months, I think we've done it like 8 times, which is pretty. I feel like I've spent more weekends in Oklahoma than I actually have where I live in Denver.
Right.
But.
So you, because you're 5 years younger than I am and 6 years younger than Desiree, by the time we were in college or off beyond high school, you were still living in the house when mom and dad took custody of Clayton and Elijah. So you actually helped raise the boys for a period of time. What was it like kind of as a full-time job with you, mom and dad, raising Clayton and Elijah in Broken Arrow?
Yeah. So I've always kind of said that like when a Clayton was born, or rather even when he was like, when I first learned that Desiree was pregnant with him,
Right.
my whole life like very much shifted of like, I've been asked a lot, like it's kind of a common question to be asked of like, when do you really feel like you grew up?
Right.
Like when do you feel like you became an adult?
Right.
And like in a lot of aspects, I feel like that happened like when I became an aunt.
Yeah.
Because I went from, being a kid and just not having responsibilities or worrying about anything, right? In, 6th grade to then like almost feeling like a parent and going from, diaper changes and bottle feedings in the middle of the night and, all kinds of things like that of
all the way to senior year.
Yeah. So, I mean, my whole time so Desiree was pregnant with him when I was 11, but by the time he was born with Clayton, I was 12.
Mm-hmm.
And from that moment forward, I felt like I grew up in a lot of senses of like, I had to be an adult in a lot of ways.
I feel like for a lot of people, when children are in those situations where it's a younger sibling, I think more frequently, but same difference in a way, it really can kind of force you to grow up. And there are like pros and cons, I feel like, to that, because it's like, yes, maturity comes into play. And there are situations where the maturity for the person doesn't catch up to the responsibilities. But
Right.
I generally speaking, like observing you and knowing you, I would say definitely you had that aspect of maturity about yourself even a little before. And mom and dad kind of raised us in a way that was like, if you want something or really need something, like you can get a job for it and work for it. And they provided for us, but they wanted us to learn how to provide for ourselves, especially when it came to wants.
Yeah.
So that foundation of maturity was sort of established in us for kind of a young age. And I think it transferred well to you for when you were helping with the boys. And mom was always a nurturing person too, so she modeled that for you. And dad was always more structured. So there's the balance of our parents, which I think transferred well to Clayton and Elijah when you were helping with them. And
I think it's important to note too, like it was never, the dynamic was a little different than what most people might think, because I didn't, when I found out that Desiree was pregnant with Clayton and I was 11 at the time, there was never a moment of like, because I'm the youngest, right? So there was never a moment of like, great, now I'm not the youngest anymore. Or great, like now I'm gonna have to split this time with my parents or whatever. Like that just wasn't how it went. Like there was never a sense of like this lifestyle.
Inconvenience.
Yeah, there was never a sense of like this lifestyle is being like thrust upon me.
Right.
It was always I always took it as like, this is an honor.
Yeah.
Like I'm honored that I get to serve
Right.
as Clayton and Elijah's aunt, and that my, a lot of like the title of like mom or dad
Right.
like holds a lot of weight to people, as it should.
Right.
And like to me, I took that title of aunt to mean so much that it became like my identity in a lot of ways of like, I felt like I stepped up to the challenge that was before me of like, it was never forced on me in any way, but like I wouldn't want it any other way. Like I wanted that responsibility. I wanted that honor that came with being their aunt.
Yeah.
And so in a lot of ways, like that was my greatest life's work in a lot of ways.
It's interesting because we kind of live in a culture and a time where some people do have the argument or use this idea that children can be an inconvenience, for your life, for your career, for your future goals. And we do plan things in life, and then some things aren't planned. And I don't particularly adapt that mindset that children are an inconvenience. I think that it can be unexpected and unplanned, but ultimately a gift. Yeah. And so it's not exactly the same where some people get into it, like if someone has an unexpected pregnancy or something like that. But in a way, for our family, the pregnancies with Desiree were unexpected, and the responsibility that came to her, but to us as well, was unexpected as well.
Yeah. I mean, it was very unexpected. I know that when the reactions that I had with Elijah and Clayton's like announcement of pregnancy were very different. Yeah. Of course, like their birth was just as joyous and just as the same.
Right.
But their the initial like surprise, I think, was very different. Like, and part of that's my age too. At the time I was 11 when Desiree said I'm pregnant with Clayton. And so I was just kind of like, it was almost like getting a puppy. Like I was kind of like, oh my God, this is the greatest day of my life. Yeah. Like, like I was like.
And in some ways it can be initially, before you actually get into it and realize how full time it would be.
Yeah.
Like in a traditional setting, the aunt and the uncle, you would think you spend time with your nieces and nephews and you get to give them back.
Right. Kind of like grandparents are supposed to be able to like,
right.
you fill them up with sugar and send them back.
Right.
Like that's not the relationship we had though.
But the reality, the reality is that was not the scenario here. And that, that ultimately I guess wasn't the plan, and that's okay. And we're happy with how it played out.
Yeah.
Because it's for a greater purpose, and we sort of took a step back and eventually realized that and adapted to it as necessary. But it doesn't change the reality that things can be difficult and stressful, and that unexpected things happen in life.
Yeah.
And then when Elijah sort of comes onto the scene, you were a big part of that as well too, right?
Yeah. So that's kind of what I was saying earlier of like my reaction to like Clayton being, when I found out that Desiree was born or was going to have Clayton, I was immediately just like over the moon. Like, this is the greatest thing ever. I'm sure mom and dad had, they were older and had more cognizance of like what entails to raise a child. And I had no idea yet, which I quickly learned. But then when I found out that she was pregnant with Elijah, this was many years later. So, I had already kind of been raising Clayton and already knew what it entailed and how that affected our lives. And like, of course, we're excited because we love him and all that. But at the same time, it was kind of like, are you kidding? Like, we already have so much on our plate trying to raise Clayton, and now we're going to have to do this again. And it was like, I think anyone would have that same reaction of like, there's part of you that's like, we of course are so excited, but we're also like, this was not planned and this is a lot to take on. Right. But of course that, that changes a lot once they're born, because then it shifts to being like, we're just over the moon that we have this child to love. And,
it's different reality sort of sets in. A different reality sort of sets in at that point.
For sure. Yeah.
And then, so now we're going to kind of get into the story and the mission for Rescue Clayton. And we're going to fast forward to 2018. How would you explain the discovery of Elijah and the 911 call? You did the 911 call, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Kind of walk us through that, or the reality of your thought process for that.
Yeah. So, basically, so it was mom and I at the house at the time, and I was so my room borders Clayton and Elijah's room, and there's just one thin wall that separates them, so it's just like the two doors there. And I was in my room with my door open, and I was kind of just on my laptop getting ready to go to school. And then mom was going into Clayton and Elijah's room to wake up Elijah. Right. Clayton had already gone off to school at that time. And she went in, flipped the light on, and she always did this thing where she would do... she would say, "Is there a baby in there?" And then she would walk a few steps closer. And then she would say, "Is there a baby in there?" And she walked a few steps closer. Right. And like usually by that point, Elijah was awake. And so like he would, kind of be like giggling at that. And like it was kind of like peekaboo. It was like the same like kind of thing. Yeah. So he'd be very playful and stuff. And I remember, because our doors were open, I remember sitting on the edge of my bed with my computer and listening to that and not hearing Elijah like giggle or anything back like he normally did. And I kind of just remember being like, well, that's a little weird, but like whatever, like not thinking much of it. And then I just heard mom scream, and I threw my laptop off my lap. I jumped up, ran around the corner into Clayton and Elijah's room. And when I walked in, she had just begun to pick him up out of the crib.
And then you made the 911 call. Yeah. So then she had, there was obviously something wrong. And so I immediately ran back into my room where I left my phone on the ground and picked it up. I ran back into Clayton and Elijah's room and I dialed 911 and I started getting on the phone with the operator by that point. And then I had mom hand me Elijah while I was on the phone with the operator. What was that experience like, knowing that Elijah... when the realization of the emergency set in, and then of his death?
I think it's a hard thing to explain. And like having in the documentary, like having listened to snippets of my 911 phone call again, like it brought me back to that point. And it was, it's kind of a hard emotion to like conceptualize in words, because it's like, it's just like your worst fear coming true in front of you. Like it's, I think any parent can relate to that, or, you know, in my situation, I may not have been their parent, but I felt like it
A full-time
a lot
caretaker.
of ways. Right. Any caretaker of a child,
Right.
like that's your worst nightmare is that,
Yeah.
you know, they die.
And
so
you mentioned the documentary, and this is something that we recommend people go see. There is a documentary by Red River TV and Project 46 out of Oklahoma City. It's called Saving Clayton.
Yep.
You can go to savingclayton.com to watch that documentary, or you can go to rescueclayton.com and it will loop you through it. But there are other parts and details to the story with you in that documentary. And this was a large project that they worked on for almost 2 years.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a lot of emotion involved in having to relive this sort of reality every time you tell the story. But I think it's important to bring people in as close as possible to the perspective of it for the sake of empathy. But it is a hard topic, and we are grateful for the work that Project 46 and Red River TV did with that film.
Yeah, they did a great job for sure. It's hard to fit 5 years of something this crazy into an hour and a half, but you know, it's a good place for people to start and like really be able to dive deep into this. And then the podcast is a great way for them to get more detail and kind of expand upon the gaps that may be, you know, that they may be questioning. But yeah, I think as far as like my emotions in that moment, it was kind of one of those just like sheer panic modes. And I think it feels like a bad dream in a way of like, you think like this can't be happening. Like there was that kind of like a trigger of like, I think when your worst nightmare comes true, there's always that moment of like, this can't be happening. Like,
do you feel like you operated mostly on adrenaline at that time?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
When I'm in like an emergency situation, it's almost like I'm outside of my body. Like and it's hard to, I don't remember what I did, you know, and it was just kind of instinctual. Yeah.
And I think that, I don't think the memory of it ever got blurry for me. I think I could still like recount my steps and movements.
Right.
But there definitely was this like, just survival of like I felt like I went into like panic survival mode of like instincts were just taking over, you know. And so like that I think panic, that's like really the only word that I can describe like that feeling. It was just like sheer panic of like your whole world crashing down on you like in one moment, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
You made the 911 call, and we're going to listen to that now. And just so people know, this audio for this 911 call to some may be disturbing because of the nature of the scenario, so viewer discretion is advised.
Wagoner County. My nephew, he's not moving. He's not moving. Okay. What's the address? Give me the address, please. What's the number you're calling me from? Okay, how old is he? He's in the house. Okay. Are you with him right now? Yes, I'm with him. He's not moving. Is he awake? No, he's not. Is he breathing? No, he's not. Please help. Okay. Did you witness this? No, I just want to go get him out of his bed. Okay. Is there a defibrillator available? No, there's not. I'm in my house. No, baby, okay, no. Listen to me. I'm sending the paramedics to help you now. Stay on the line. I'll tell you exactly what to do next. Are you right by him? I'm right by him. Okay, listen carefully. Lay him flat on his back. Remove any pillows. He's not moving at all. Listen to me. Lay him flat on his back. He's cold. He's ice cold. He's on his back. Okay. Feel next time. Look in his mouth for food or vomit. He's not. Is there anything in his mouth? No, there's nothing in his mouth. Okay. He's flat. Now listen. Place your hand on his forehead, your other hand under his neck. Then listen to me. Carefully tilt the head back. Put your ear next to his mouth. He's cold. Can you feel or hear any breathing? No, his face is white. He's not here. I'm going to tell you how to give mouth to mouth. Just help us. Jesus. Are you still there? Hello? What? I'm going to tell you how to give mouth to mouth. Okay. Okay. Pinch his nose closed. His mouth won't even open. His mouth won't open. When was the last time you saw him? When was the last time you saw him? We just woke him up in the morning last night. So you woke him up last night, and you told me his mouth won't open? His mouth won't open. It's purple and white. I can't. Is he still in the bed? He's on the floor. Okay. Can you try and give mouth to mouth? I can't even open his mouth. Okay. Okay. I'm going to stay. Okay. Listen to me. I'm going to stay on the mouth. I'm going to stay on the phone with you until they get there. Okay? Oh, God, baby. I'm so sorry. With you. Oh my God. Who else is there with you? My mom and grandma. Okay, send her to open the door. Send somebody out to wave down the paramedics. No. Okay, listen to me. Do you want to try chest compressions on him? Oh my God. I'm gonna tell you how to do chest compressions. You're gonna what? I'm gonna tell you how to do chest compressions. Can you try that for me? What? Tell me. Do you see the paramedic? What? Do you see the paramedics? No, I don't. They're there. Go out and wave them down. Oh my God! Stay with him. Go with him. Go with him. Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God, he's dead.
So we fast forward and we've sat down with mom and we've sat down with dad and they've given the details up until this point. But let's talk about, as mom and dad's child, you and I and Desiree, for us and for you, what do you feel, what was it like seeing mom and dad put in handcuffs for the first time and being arrested and behind bars?
Yeah, that was a really crazy experience. I remember the first time, because obviously I saw them get cuffed multiple times after that. But the first time, which was the most traumatic by far, was I remember I was a little late to the hearing. I think there's a train that crosses right before the county courthouse.
In Wagoner.
And so I got stuck like right as a train was coming, so I had to stop. So I was like 5 minutes late. So they had just started the hearing right when I was walking in. And I walked in and I remember I walked into them being cuffed. Like I didn't even get to hear what was said beforehand. I just walked in as they were. Yeah, no context. I just walked in as they were being put in cuffs. And so that like shock of that was like, wow, this is really happening. Like this isn't like we thought this was going to blow over fast, but like this is actually happening. Like we're in the thick of this fight now.
And what's interesting is really the reality of this. There is the legalities and the way that things are supposed to go. But at the end of the day, regardless of what's on paper or what people think or people's understanding, this really is guilty until proven innocent. Whereas it's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. Yeah. But mom and dad are already put in handcuffs, put in jail. They spent a total of 8 months in jail for charges for crimes they didn't commit. I mean, any way you want to paint, any way anyone wants to paint it, at the end of the day, it is guilty until proven innocent. And that's, I think, a huge flaw in our system. Yeah. And in some ways, I understand when they're operating quickly when it comes to children, when it comes to certain crimes. I just hope that we end up somewhere down the road in Oklahoma finding some sort of middle ground that really actually operates as innocent until proven guilty. And the actions that are carried out with that by law enforcement or by those that are elected to enforce the laws. I really hope that there is some sort of middle ground that really is treating people as innocent until proven guilty. Because if you're sitting behind bars and in handcuffs and on the news talking about something that they have yet to even collect evidence for, or is simply speculation, that already paints you as guilty.
Yeah.
And you're already projected to the world as that, like mom and dad were.
And I think to touch on what you said about like the news, I'd say that was probably one of the hardest parts of the way our system is. So like, I understand there's a need to inform the public of potential dangers or right. And of course, like I understand that. And freedom of the press is so important. But there is a part of me, like from the perspective of a person that was living it out.
Right.
It was hard to see, and it was hard to rationalize why it was okay to put people's mugshots attached to these heinous crimes and their full names and a picture of their house so people can find where you live on air, on local news channels and state news channels before you've been proven to be anything. Right. Like that was a hard thing for me. And of course, like not wanting to ever infringe upon that freedom of the press, but trying to wrap your brain around, okay, well, if we are going to say it's innocent until proven guilty, how can you do that if you are also legally allowed to completely drag them through publicly, you know, and like how can those both coexist at the same time? And like, what is the best way for, you know, us as a society to find like, without infringing upon the freedom of the press, but also find a way to not infringe upon civil rights of people and their personal, you know, liberties to have the right to be proven guilty in court rather than simply be speculated upon and dragged through the mud in that way.
What's interesting about this case with the Woolley family in particular, though, is there in fact was not any evidence to back up the accusations that they were making. In fact, there was evidence stacked against it, which the family offered to the Wagoner County officials and the investigators. And then eventually we had professionals come in and disprove all of their allegations. Yeah. So it is a unique situation in some, and I understand why the law operates quickly when there is the potential for something, but we really need to work in Oklahoma and in the United States to find this middle ground of innocent until proven guilty and truly walking that out.
Right. This is one thing to say it. It's another thing. Like your actions have to back that up, right? And the system's actions from, you know, every level of like even the detective all the way through, you know, the sheriff and then the judges and the DA and like all of the different people involved on the prosecution side of this, like none of them walk that out. None of them actually,
they don't live in our reality.
Right. They don't believe,
or just the citizens' reality.
Yeah. They don't believe that. It's very much a bias on their part of like, if they have a hunch, so to speak, or whatever that might be, like that to them is enough evidence. Like
our best bet at this point with the way the system is already built is a jury of your peers.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think that's the best. So that's the closest we gotten to truly remaining neutral.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we were never actually given a trial.
No,
we never
even
actually were given the ability to have a trial with a jury of our peers, even though that's, you know, that right there is unconstitutional. Right. The right to speedy trial, that doesn't exist.
That's not a real thing.
That's not a real thing.
As far as our experience.
Yeah, we went through this for years, and we were put back to the beginning so many times by just shady ways of operating in the prosecution system that like they were able to basically put off us ever actually getting to a trial.
And where I stand with that, regardless of job descriptions of the rules that were written, unethical is unethical. Right is right and wrong is wrong. And I don't know all the rules. I'm not a professional. I'm not a law enforcement, but I stand firmly on things were executed poorly and incorrectly, and I have seen them done better in real life scenarios in other places that I've observed.
Well, and that's why we have experts, right? Is because you and I may not be experts. We're just, you know, the people that lived it out. But like we have experts. We have world-renowned experts in this, you know, very particular situations that have said, hey, these things were done illegally. These things were wrong.
Yeah, and a lot of those people sort of alluded to the fact that this was poor work and almost embarrassing for law enforcement, for professionals. I mean, we had people from Michigan who have practiced like 3 times the amount of time people in Wagoner County have, or something around that area. Just a lot more experience, and they're just like, how do you even come to these conclusions if you're truly doing your job? And these are people with more experience than Wagoner County officials.
Right. Well, and that's one of the reasons why it's so important to note like that the medical examiner's office for Oklahoma lost their accreditation 13 years ago, have an F rating. Like when people say, how could this happen? Well, they're not accredited.
Right.
So
and without the accreditation, there is little to no checks and balances on the systems.
Yeah, because if you're not accredited to, the department or whatever department is overseeing that, like for all the medical examiner's offices in the country, if you did not pass inspection to be able to get that accreditation, then you don't have to follow the regulations and the rules in place to make sure that the autopsies you're performing are done correctly, are done with facts in mind.
It almost makes you wonder if they don't want to be accredited for that reason. I don't know that to be true, but
it certainly
plays
makes you
in their
question.
favor. It plays in their favor.
Yeah.
And so we're going to kind of fast forward again here. And there was a scenario with someone on the team of the prosecution that came to your campus, Oklahoma State University.
Yeah.
In Stillwater. And what was the interaction you had with this person, and what was their role?
Yeah, so this was at the time because this all happened when I was a senior in high school. Now, this happened when I was a freshman in college. So I was attending Oklahoma State University in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And I was walking to the library, and I was on campus, and I got a call from campus police, so Oklahoma State campus police.
Okay.
And at the time, I was like, I don't know, maybe there's like an issue with my car or I don't know, parking,
Something
something arbitrary that had nothing to do. Situation. And so I answered, and I was like, hey, and they were like, where are you? That was like the first thing I went out. They were like, where are you? And I was like, that's weird.
And that's campus police.
Campus police, yeah. So immediately I was like, in my head, I was like, there's something, this has to do with mom and dad. Like there's something connected.
Right.
And I said, I'm about to be at the library. And they were like, go to the library, don't move. And then they hung up, and I was like, okay. So I'm now expecting, like, I don't know if I'm going to be arrested. I just was expecting the worst. And so I'm in the library, which if you've ever been to a large college campus, the library is a very central part of life.
Yeah.
And so it's like where the most people are
very
at
public.
all times. Yeah. Like 24/7, that's where the most people are at all times, is at the library. So I was at Edmund Lowe Library at OSU, and, just thousands of kids are in this library that I know a lot of. And in walks the lead detective on the case, his, assistant detective, or he's the one that was in all the other interviews and stuff, and then a sheriff's deputy. So there's three of them.
Local sheriff?
The Wagoner County. These were all three officers from Wagoner County.
Wagoner County Sheriff's deputy.
So no one from campus police was involved, other than the phone call. And they walk in, and when they walk in, they just have these really smug looks on their faces. And so I'm like, okay, I kind of was like, I'm going to get arrested.
Right.
And,
at this point, they just apparently arrest anybody.
Right. So it's a possibility. And instead of that, the lead detective, he throws these papers at me, and he's like, here you go. And I was like, what is this? Because it's like, stack of papers. I don't know what this means. And I don't even know at the time, I didn't even know what a grand jury meant. I know what a jury is. Grand jury, never heard of it, no idea. And so he said, well, since you wouldn't talk to us last time, now we got to do it the hard way.
And the reason that you didn't give them much information last time is because you came to the conclusion that you probably would need a lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and give a little brief context on that so everyone knows. So my first initial interrogation was before I knew of any kind of accusations made against my parents or anything.
So you went in blindly.
Right. It was the next day after Elijah died. Right. And then
at this point, we think the professionals are doing their job ethically.
Right. So I'm obviously cooperating wholeheartedly. I have nothing to hide. Have never had anything to hide through this whole time. I'm just answering the questions, no knowledge that they may be about to ruin my whole family's life. Right. And then a couple days pass after that, and this is after we now know what they're accusing us of and what they think happened, and we now know, okay, now we're at odds. We thought you were helping us, but now we know you're actually trying to ruin us.
It's clear we need representation.
Right. It's clear that we need to be protected because you're not going to protect us. And so that next interview was several days after. So I already had the knowledge of these accusations, and I already knew they were not on our side. They did not have our best interest at heart, or Elijah's, or Clayton's. So at this point, I'm more on the defense at this point because I'm now trying to, protect him. The truth. And so this was that second interview, and I go in, and I was advised at that time by a lawyer to make sure they Mirandized me. And for those of you who don't know, it's hard based on cop shows to actually know when you're supposed to use Miranda. But Mirandizing people, at least to my knowledge, it's not necessarily just if you're being arrested or something of that nature.
Right.
You Mirandize somebody to therefore mean that anything that they say can now be used in a court of law.
So any scenario when you're with law enforcement or any scenario when you're with someone in a legal setting, if they are going to attempt to have a conversation with you, you feel that you should be Mirandized.
I mean,
because they could take what you say and use it in court.
Yes and no. I mean, I think if you're an offender bender, you probably don't need it.
Right.
But I think that if you're talking
it's clear
about...
there's an investigation here.
if there's an investigation that you are a part of in any capacity,
right,
and it's a serious investigation, I would recommend you probably want to be Mirandized because it protects you.
Right.
And I don't want to get too much into that because I'm not an expert. I'm not a lawyer. But this is what I was advised by an expert to do.
Right.
I was advised that, hey, you should be Mirandized because this is obviously going to affect potentially you, potentially your parents. You should be Mirandized so that way anything you say can be used in court and they can't take it out of context or whatever.
Right.
And so the first time that I was interviewed, he Mirandized me and he said, and I don't know, there's a quote of this in the documentary, but I don't know if you'll be able to play one here, but there's a quote and he says, don't freak out. I'm going to Mirandize you. I do this to anybody I talk to anytime.
That's what he said in
That's
your
the exact quote.
First encounter with him.
First encounter with him. So then this second interview with him days later.
OSU
No. It's the second interview with him days later. Okay. My second interrogation.
In Wagoner.
The first thing he says is, I'm not going to Mirandize you right now. So he went from saying, I always do this every time, no matter what, don't worry, to I'm not going to do it. So his tune changed really fast. So when he said that, I immediately knew, okay, but you said you always did it. So now I'm thinking there's something wrong.
Right.
So I want you to do it.
Right.
So, and then he refused to Mirandize me and said, I'm not going to do that. And I said, well, I would like you to. And I said, can anything I say be used against me or my family in court? And he said no. So he outright lied.
On record.
On record lied. There's a video of it. And then I said, okay, I'm going to ask you again because I know you're lying. And I said, so can anything I say be used against me or my parents in court of law? And he said, well, it depends what you say.
I'm not going to read you your rights today. At this point, I don't feel the necessity to do that.
Why not?
I don't feel like you're a suspect at this point in the investigation. Okay? So we're just talking.
But whatever I say can still be held in court, right?
No. I can read you your rights if you want me to, but we're just talking right now.
But I'm asking, can what I say in here, is this being held against me in court? Or against anyone in my family in court?
It just depends on what you tell me.
So, yes. Okay.
I'm not trying to trick you. I'm just saying, unless you're worried about something that you think you need to tell.
No, not at all, but I just feel more comfortable with the lawyers. But
okay, well, let's stop right there.
So he was being shady.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he was outright lying on record, which we've caught him doing multiple times. But this was one that I just found to be so he was trying to trick at the time a 17-year-old into
Once we got talking with lawyers and gained a little bit of experience or understanding of things, we do realize there were actually quite a bit of unethical practices from the Wagoner County officials. Okay, so you're at OSU on campus in the library, and the Wagoner County investigator comes to you, right?
Yeah. So meeting me in the most busy place on campus, that was hard, and served me these papers for this grand jury proceeding. And like I explained, he said it was because in that second interview I wanted to be Mirandized.
Right.
And so because I wanted, my rights honored, he wanted to do it this way. So I got summoned for a grand jury proceeding.
And what is a grand jury?
Yeah, so a grand jury proceeding is basically what the prosecution does to get an indictment. So if you want to indict somebody for a crime, and my understanding of it, it's kind of like if you didn't really have enough, or the process in which you would normally go of just filing charges and then having preliminary hearing and then having your jury trial. If the judge or something isn't signing off on that to get it to that process, this is my understanding, I could be wrong, then you would go to a grand jury proceeding to get the indictment, which is kind of a way of bypassing that process.
It's not equivalent to a trial.
No, but it is a fast track to getting someone hit with charges.
Right.
So that's kind of the way to do it, right? It's fast track to getting someone arrested.
Right.
So we went in for this indictment, and they were trying to indict mom and dad for murder at this grand jury proceeding for murder and child sexual abuse.
And you being a witness to that somehow.
Yeah, so I was called to be a witness to it. And a grand jury proceeding is a private proceeding, meaning that I was sworn under oath for 6 months from the time I was served that I could not tell a soul about anything about it.
So for 6 months, you couldn't talk about anything that happened that you had been through with this, with Elijah dying, Clayton being taken away, you being taken away by DHS.
Well, I couldn't talk about the grand jury proceeding.
Oh, I see.
So I couldn't talk about my testimony, what I saw, what I heard.
Okay.
So I was sworn to see. I couldn't even tell people that I had been served.
Right.
You know. So so I went through this. So I was served these papers. I showed up at it was one of the government buildings in downtown Oklahoma City, and I showed up and I had gotten a lawyer just for this grand jury proceeding to protect myself. I was 18, at the time. And so I went, and rather than me testify that day like I was told I was going to, I guess someone else's testimony was going longer, so they had to push me to another day. But they still had me there. So my lawyer had advised me ahead of time before I got there to not go in without him. He was like, make sure you stay with me. But I got there first. So I checked in at the front desk of this building, and they said, okay, right this way. And I said, oh, I'm going to wait for my lawyer to get here first. So I'll let you know when he's here. And she said, oh, he's already here waiting for you.
Who said this?
The secretary. So I'm guessing she had been told to say that.
The secretary at this Oklahoma City office where they're about to have you in front of a grand jury said, your lawyer's already here, so come in this room.
Right. And so I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I was like, just trusting.
Right.
And she led me into this room, and in this room it was just like a conference room.
Right.
And there was this big table, and there was like 12 chairs around the table. ADA Bennett, or one of the assistant district attorneys, had met her somewhere along the walk to take me to the room. And so she went back to her desk, and he continued the walk with me. And he opened the door for me. And then when I got in the room, there was a big case file that said William H. Woolley on the front.
Dad's name.
So it said my father's name on the front. And it was a thick case file,
Right.
And there's 12 chairs in this room, and he pulls out the chair in front of the case file for me to sit in. So he pulls out this one chair.
So he has you sit in front of Dad's file intentionally.
Intentionally has me sit in front of this file, and then he leaves me alone in this room. My lawyer's nowhere to be found. He just leaves me alone in this room.
And they tricked you to think your lawyer was already in the room.
They tricked me to separate me from my lawyer.
That doesn't seem legal or ethical.
Yeah, so they did that, and then about 10 minutes went by, maybe 15. I didn't have a clock, so I wasn't sure, but about 10 or 15 minutes went by, and then my lawyer comes in. Someone had brought him in, and he was like, "What? I told you not to go in without me. Why did you do this?" And I was like, well, they told me you were in here. And then he looked at the case file, and he was like, "You didn't touch it, right?" And I was like, "No, I'm not that stupid. Of course not."
Right.
So that was kind of my first initial interaction with the grand jury proceeding.
Right.
So that kind of set it off on a
So
weird
it kind of seems from the beginning to be like an ambush.
Yeah, from the beginning it seemed like an attack. It seemed like they were trying to trick me and all this stuff.
Right. They're trying to prey on the ignorance of citizens.
Yeah, and I think prey on the youngest in a lot of ways. I think there was a lot of that.
In a lot of ways you were used as a bargaining chip. Yeah. And I think the children were used as a bargaining chip, me, you, and Desiree. And obviously Clayton is being used as a bargaining chip for the prosecution.
Uncle Gabe, you be staying at the house and eat pancakes with us in the daytime. And I love you.